In approaching the theme of OMG, I thought I'd take something of a literal approach and walk through what those letters stand for me. This is a story I've been keen to share with the world for some time. The series of events that led me to define myself as an atheist. Thank you. I was raised with a very positive view of religion, and I still have a lot of respect for people of faith, depending on how they approach their beliefs. It was demonstrated to me from a young age that different people will use the exact same religious texts to justify hate as others do to justify love. There can be a lot of personal influence behind the way we interpret our sacred texts. I grew up with understanding and open-minded parents who regularly attended church services. I was never particularly interested in attending them myself, but they always made it known to me that I would be welcome should I ever choose to come along. I spent years playing around with the concepts of various belief systems, but for a long time, I couldn't figure out where I sat on the vast spectrum of spiritual faith. At this point, we reach the M in my OMG story, which stands for mental illness, and my long-term struggle to get on top of it. This closely follows the O, which simply put stands for ouch. My diagnosis is bipolar disorder, and I worked through many arduous years to reach a place where I can efficiently manage my condition. As it stands, I am more stable than ever before, and have been for longer than I'd ever previously expected. However, it took an extreme amount of time, patience, and effort to get myself to this point. At the very end of 2009, I hit that aforementioned O for ouch. In an accident that was entirely my fault and honestly too ridiculous to go into in detail, I was quite badly injured. Fractured sternum, concussion, neck and back trauma, the whole kit and caboodle. After being sent home on painkillers with the results of emergency room x-rays, I was told that my injuries would likely take a year to heal to a point where I would be fully functional again. I struggled with this idea, but was quickly forced to accept my fate, a fate that kept me stuck at home in great amounts of pain. I can't remember why I decided to stop taking my psychiatric medications, but it seems likely that it would have been too much to manage when I had so much physical pain to deal with. In trying to cope with it all, I turned to more illicit substances, a habit that built up to the point where I failed to properly notice when the pain itself had actually started fading away. The euphoria of a manic episode is something that can be hard to describe adequately to someone who's never experienced it. In the throes of mania-driven psychosis, your mind allows you to believe that you're in the most amazing position anyone could possibly know, that you possess a power that sets you apart from the trappings of mortal life, and that you could well be a part of something that extends beyond the world as we know it. Experiencing a psychotic episode means that you can't see when your beliefs are based in delusions. To this day, when I watch movies and TV shows where the protagonist insists to skeptical offsiders that they're not crazy, I can't help but remember how right those offsiders are to be skeptical. I know all too well that every person suffering from such an episode will always insist that what they're seeing is the truth, and they'll genuinely believe it just as much as any of those fictional protagonists. When I was hospitalized for the treatment of my own manic psychosis, I met a number of other patients in the ward. Most have faded from my memory, but one stands out for the impact he had on my mindset. Sitting down next to me in the corridor of a psychiatric treatment facility, this man told me with full conviction and belief that he was the new earthly incarnation of the Christian God. When I started listening to him, he told me that I was destined to be his first disciple. I'll refer to this man by his first name, which was actually Donald, although I assure you that this was not the same Donald that will probably be springing to your mind right now. Through the following weeks in that hospital ward, I listened to the words Donald span to me as prophecy, and I was dazzled by what I was hearing. I can't remember well enough to adequately explain it to you, but the stories he told me seemed not just amazing, but believable. The wisdom he passed down to me, his disciple, seemed genuinely inspired by the divine. When I accepted the treatment offered to me in the form of medication, I thought this was a test of my faith. I thought that I would take these pills and prove to all around me that what I was saying wasn't the result of mental illness. My faith as a modern disciple was sure to be rewarded for completing such a test. What happened instead, of course,
was that I spent the following months slowly drifting out of my delusions. Donald and I had exchanged email addresses, and he emailed me a number of times after we parted ways. Slowly, I started seeing that his words weren't prophecy, they were gibberish, the randomly generated ideas of an unwell mind. When I looked back over the past contacts that remained in my Gmail inbox, I could see that it wasn't his words that had changed, it was my perception of them. After that, I started thinking. I'm a well-educated individual living in a time and a place where I have easier access to more information than I would have had at any other point in history. The internet provides us with a modern-day Library of Alexandria, even though every piece of information does come with an equal and opposite piece of misinformation. But still, it's never been easier to seek advice from experts, to look at the lessons of the past, or to check the sources from which we gather our ideas. With that in mind, I looked back over my own experience and considered something. If it was that easy to convince me that this man was the earthly incarnation of a divine spirit and that his words would lead me to a higher understanding of spirituality, how easy must it have been to convince people when the only available source of information was a man riding from town to town on the back of a camel? This question destroyed my idea of religion as it had ever been presented to me. I know well enough that my experience speaks against religious texts rather than any possibility of a higher power itself, but it has imbued me with a need to be skeptical that has lasted nearly 10 years now. As I mentioned at the start of the story, I still have a great deal of respect for people of faith, or specifically for those who don't use their faith to demonize others. I know there are religious communities that are wonderfully accepting of queer people and other minorities, and those communities are very valuable, even if you don't share their faith. Even as an atheist, I find myself drawn to those religious groups who extend a kind hand to people who are suffering, without the expectation to put your own hand on a Bible and declare dedication to a higher power. I truly believe that religion is whatever you make it. God could be whoever or whatever you need him, her, or they to be at various different points in your life. The journey of my own OMG experience, the ouch, the mental illness, and the man who wasn't God, doesn't mean there is no God, but has taught me a lesson that I suspect will stay with me for a long time to come. For me, faith alone is not enough. I'm forever reminding myself to keep a frame of mind that questions the information that enters it. I try to remember that questioning doesn't necessarily mean doubting, but I hesitate before accepting beliefs regarding subjects that we can never truly know in their entirety. I know that I exist in a universe of endless possibilities, and among those is the possibility that I may well be wrong. And from the religious example demonstrated to me through my parents, their community, and the many other truly wonderful people of faith that I've met in my travels, I do at least have faith that if there is a God, she'll be open to my need to ask myself those questions.